So with that, I'm going to jump into the different types of insurance policies. So hopefully you guys received the handout. If you printed that out, that's fine. If not, I'll be able to cover those topics for you. The first thing I want to talk about is general liability insurance. This is going to be the baseline for pretty much any company when it comes to their insurance portfolio. The first thing they're going to need, is general liability. General liability insurance protects you for property damage or personal injury that someone might sustain while you're doing business. So the easiest scenario is if you have an office space, you have retail space, you have customers that come into your establishment. If someone slips and falls and gets hurt and decides to sue you for those damages, that's what general liability insurance would protect you for. The other thing it would protect you for is if you go to your client's place of business or you go to your client's home, if you do damage to their property, then the general liability insurance would protect you for that. Most times people get introduced to general liability insurance because they're going to be renting space. So you're signing a lease agreement. The landlord will usually ask for a copy of your general liability insurance. So this is a lot of times when I get introduced to business owners is when they're looking to take that step of getting space, and now they're being asked to have a general liability policy. The other place where we're starting to see more requests for general liability is in farmers markets, vendor fairs, any type of trade show. A lot of these venues now are requiring people who are going to be selling or presenting at these locations to have their own general liability policy. And again, the reason being is if someone gets hurt or if you do damage to their property, they want to make sure that you have coverage in place to take care of that. So for 95% of all businesses, this is going to be the first thing that you look at is general liability. Now, general liability insurance is based off a couple different things when it comes to prices. The type of business that you're running. If it's a business, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said earlier, there's not a lot of risk. The premium is going to be a little less expensive. If it's a company that's a little more unique, maybe a little more high traffic, a little more dangerous, then you're going to see that reflected in the premium as well. The other thing that you're going to see for the price is your revenue. They're going to ask what your sales are. The larger business you are, the more customers you have, the more expensive the insurance will be. So if you're a startup, you don't have a lot of revenue, the premium will be a little more reasonable, but I have seen companies that will go in maybe every 3 to 5 years and they will do an audit and see if your business has grown. And the reason they do that is if you start, let's use a carpenter, for instance. If you start out and you only have 5 clients in a year, your risk is pretty low, your exposure is low. But as your business grows, now maybe you have 50 clients in a year. That's more risk, that's more exposure for a potential claim. So the exposure is more, so the premium will go up along those lines. So just know that the type of business and the volume of business that you do is what's going to impact your general liability. So to recap general liability, it's going to protect you against physical injury or property damage, or in the case of someone who has a product, or if you're a carpenter, if you're building something, if someone gets hurt from that product or that product breaks and causes damage, then that's where your general liability insurance is going to come into play. General liability insurance, we work with a dozen different companies. It's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of different companies out there that do general liability insurance. And if your business is pretty straightforward and not one of those unique niche businesses I talked about, you shouldn't really have too much trouble finding general liability insurance. Now, some companies don't necessarily like to write startups. We do work with some that do. But one good rule of thumb is as you get more experience and as your business grows, it's always a good idea to shop around, because the more experience you have, the better opportunity from an insurance standpoint. So with the general liability piece, does anyone have any, excuse me, questions about general liability?
Travis, I've got a question. Simeon here, microbusiness.
Yes.
So oftentimes people will operate out of their home. And so maybe they've got insurance on their home. What should they be thinking about and considering if they're working from home and that's their starting point?
Yep. So if you have a homeowner's policy, some homeowners policies will extend some business coverage to you as an at-home business. They can cover some of your business property. If the only caveat usually with at-home businesses is, do you have someone coming on site? So if you're just working remote from home and you're not going to clients or clients aren't coming to you, you can usually get a small amount of coverage on your homeowner's policy to protect you. Where that line usually stops is if you are having folks come to your home, whether you're meeting with clients, whether you're selling a product and people might be picking it up at your house. Once that starts to happen is when you really should be looking at a true general liability policy for your business.
Travis, along those same lines, I don't know if it falls within this topic, but same question regarding one's vehicle. If they're now they've just been using their vehicle for personal use, but now they're going to be using it for their business. Maybe it's part-time. What should they be thinking about and considering?
Yep. Yeah, we'll get into commercial auto in a couple, but basically, if the vehicle is specifically used for business, if you're delivering, if you're bringing materials to a job site, if you're going to and from certain job sites, then you want to look at commercial auto insurance. If you're just, me as an insurance agent, I go out to people's houses to take photos. I don't have a commercial auto policy. I'm just using my car. I'm not transporting people. So if you're going to and from, just in the general day, it's really not that necessary to have a commercial auto policy. Where it becomes more of a concern is, are you transporting goods, people? Are you going to different job sites? Do you have signage on your car? That's another thing. And is the car registered to you as the individual or your business? If it's registered to a business, you really should have a commercial policy. But when we talk about commercial auto in two segments, I'll talk about more why it's important to have a commercial auto policy as opposed to a personal auto policy.
Thank you.
So we'll move from general liability, and if questions come up about a previous topic, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be happy to answer those. The next piece is professional liability or E&O insurance, errors and omissions. This type of insurance doesn't pertain to everybody. Some companies can operate their whole business cycle without ever needing to have professional liability. But what professional liability covers is financial damage that you might cause to someone. So this is it might sound similar to property damage or personal injury because there is some financial component there, but this is more designed for consultants or people that are giving their advice. And if their advice that they give or the work that they're doing for their client causes financial impact, they potentially could be sued for that. Now, that would not be covered under general liability. You would need a professional liability policy. So you see this a lot in the consultant world, people that do, let's say, social media consulting for people. Maybe you're managing someone's website, their social media platform. You make an inappropriate post that then has a negative impact on the company and that causes financial impact to them. They could turn around and sue you for doing that. It's similar to also malpractice insurance from a medical standpoint. Errors and omissions, as an insurance agent, we carry that. And the reason we carry it is someone comes in and buys an auto insurance policy from us. We don't issue it. We put the paperwork and the money in the desk and we forget to issue the policy. 3 days later, they go out and get into a car accident. Now there is some physical damage and some injury damage there, but we did not follow through on what we were supposed to do from a processing standpoint, and they don't have coverage. So now we're going to have to pay for that out of our insurance. So if you're in the business of giving advice and consulting, that's really where you need to start thinking about professional liability. If you're someone who, if you have a retail store and someone's just coming in and buying stuff, or you're a crafter, the need for professional liability really isn't there. You're not giving someone advice that can negatively impact them financially. So that's really not a concern of yours. Professional liability is more expensive than general liability. And the reason being, if there is a claim, the payout's usually a lot more. So, someone slips and falls in your store or in your restaurant, the claim probably won't be that large. But if you have a huge negative impact and costs a client a lot of money, you could be looking at a pretty substantial claim. So professional liability is going to be a little bit more expensive. Professional liability is also going to be based off the amount of work you do. So again, they're going to look at the number of clients you have. They're going to look at your revenue to determine how much activity do you have, whether there's potential for lawsuit. And it's more of a niche product when it comes to the number of companies that write professional liability. Most every company is going to write general liability. Professional liability is a little more narrow and restrictive. There's only a handful of companies out there that do it. And then for general liability and professional liability, I should touch on the limits. The industry standard is $1 million. $1 million is what we recommend every business carry. And the reason being is that's what most people in a contract want. Most landlord, and it's just something that's evolved. There's no really rhyme or reason to it, but the attorneys who drew up contracts said, hey, $1 million sounds like a good idea. And that's what everyone uses. So, if you're signing an agreement with someone from a contract standpoint or a lease, or you want to be a vendor at the Burlington Farmers Market, they're going to ask you for $1 million in liability. And so that's where we always start with our clients. Some people will say, well, that seems like a lot. There's really not a big price difference between 500,000 and $1 million. So it just makes sense to get the $1 million and then you have it. You can go up higher if you want, but in most cases, for most small businesses, $1 million satisfies everything you're going to need from a protection and from a contractual standpoint. So professional liability, just to wrap that up, is going to be something where you're a consultant, you're giving advice, and you potentially could have a negative impact financially on your client. It's going to be different than personal injury. It's going to be different than property damage. So again, not something everyone needs, but if you are in the business of giving advice and handling, people's information, then it might be worth looking at. And if you have questions, definitely reach out to an insurance agent to get clarification. Because the other thing is, sometimes from a contractual standpoint, I'm actually working with a consultant now. She's getting a job doing consulting work, but the person she's doing the consulting for, all they're requiring is general liability to satisfy the contract requirement. But ultimately, her general liability risk is almost zero because she works remotely from home doing consulting work for this individual, where her huge risk is from a professional standpoint, that if she's reviewing something for this client and gives them wrong information that negatively impacts them, then she could be on the hook for a potential lawsuit. So when you're thinking about your business and what you do, that's why you need to evaluate the type of insurance that you need from a liability standpoint. So does anyone have any questions on professional liability or errors and omissions insurance? All right, we will move. This is where now we'll talk about. Oh, Simeon.
Yeah, sorry. Can you give maybe a sense about what that kind of insurance might range?
Yep.
In terms of cost? Thanks.
So professional liability is usually going to be at least $1,000, probably in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. And again, that's going to depend on the type of work that you're doing and the volume. But historically, what I see is somewhere in that, low 1,000 to up to 2,000 for cost for the professional.
Thank you.
Yep. So commercial auto insurance. This is always a gray area for some folks, depending on the type of business that you have. And, do I need commercial? Do I not need commercial? And commercial auto insurance is more expensive than personal. So that's usually the deciding factor. And a lot of people will say, well, I'll just stick with my personal auto insurance. But there's a couple things to take into consideration. Most commercial auto policies, again, start at $1 million with liability limits. So your personal auto insurance is probably not going to be that high. So if you were to get into an accident while you're conducting business and you were to get sued for any damages, your personal auto policy might not cover you for everything that's needed. Secondly, if you are conducting business on your personal auto policy, they will probably pay the claim. In most cases, they do, but they would probably come back and drop you from the insurance after the fact because you are technically operating a business using your vehicle. So that is the risk that you take if you are using your vehicle in a business and keeping a personal auto policy. Now, like I said before, if driving isn't an integral part of your business, if you're just, you have to run to the store to get something or move something around, that's usually fine under a personal auto policy. Realtors, for instance, they keep a personal auto policy, but we can rate it for what's called business use because they are driving around a lot. They don't necessarily need a full-blown commercial policy, but just rate that they are using it for business. But if you are a contractor or you are someone who is taking products and goods between locations, going to multiple job sites in a day, or the vehicle is registered to the business, that's where you're going to want to get a commercial auto policy. Like I said, commercial auto policies are going to have higher liability limits. They're going to give you a little bit more protection. There's a little more bells and whistles when it comes to a commercial auto policy than a standard policy. If you have signage, again, we talk about lawsuits a lot. We talk about people looking to sue people. If you have signage on your vehicle, that can be a target for people. Everyone seems to think businesses have deep pockets. So even small businesses. So if you have a sign on your vehicle and you run into someone, they might think, oh, this is a business, I might be able to get something out of it. So that's why I usually recommend, to err on the side of caution. It is a little bit more money, but if you're using your vehicle frequently in your business, it would make sense to have a commercial auto policy just because you are going to get those extra levels of protection. And you're not going to get those on your personal auto policy. And you are not going to run into an issue where there's a gray area if you're using your personal auto and your personal auto insurance comes back and wants to either cancel you or maybe deny a claim because you're using your personal auto for business operations. So again, if it's casual use, you're usually okay. But if you're using your vehicle more than not for, business operations, you should look at getting a commercial auto policy. And I'll take any questions. Simi, did you have a question on that one?
Well, I'll defer to others if they have questions, and then.
Okay. I just saw you on mute, so I didn't know if you wanted to ask them.
Yeah, I was getting ready.
And with commercial auto, similar to general liability, most companies that write general liability will write commercial auto insurance. So in some cases, you can get a little bit of a discount. We do get asked that a lot with, oh, I have home insurance with this company, and if I get business insurance, can I get a discount? You can't across personal and commercial lines, but in commercial lines, we can give discounts for having multiple policies with the same company. And then the other thing with commercial auto is if you have drivers, if you have employees, they are going to ask about other drivers. They're going to ask for dates of birth, names, driver's license numbers. So if you get into a situation where your business is growing and you're going to have employees who are driving, you're going to want to make sure that they have a good driving record because it can impact your premiums. So I would recommend, if you are going to hire someone who's going to be a driver for you, to work with the motor vehicle department, run their motor vehicle record. Insurance companies like that as well. Any steps that you take from a safety standpoint is always good for the insurance company. So if they're going to ask, do you run motor vehicle reports on a regular basis? Do you have a process in place when you're bringing on new people? And if you do, and if you're doing those things, it can help with rate. The other thing that I will talk about with auto insurance is something called hired and non-owned autos. And this is another good reason to have a commercial auto policy. And this is something that I recommend everyone includes on their commercial auto insurance. Basically, what this does is if you rent a vehicle or use someone else's vehicle in your business, your policy will protect you. So if you have one vehicle that you use and you've reached a capacity where maybe you need to get a second vehicle to rent for a project to move some materials around or whatever, then this policy is going to cover you for using that vehicle. Or if you decide to use a coworker's vehicle or an employee or someone else, and you say, hey, we need to use your vehicle today for work on the job site, it's going to cover you if you get into an accident in the capacity of your business. So hired and non-owned is the name of that coverage. I highly recommend anyone with a commercial auto policy to carry that, because it's going to protect you if you're using someone else's vehicle. And if you have employees who are using their vehicle in the scope of their job as well. So that's always good to have.
Does anyone have any? Yeah, sorry. Any questions for Travis on this topic?
I have a pet sitting business,
Yes.
and most of my job is driving to other people's houses, but sometimes I have pets in my vehicle. So would that be something I would need to look into commercial auto insurance for?
I definitely would, because a lot of times if your personal auto policy covers pets at all, some of them don't, some of them, it's become more popular in auto insurance as dogs and pets in general become more popular and more commonplace. Some insurance carriers are adding coverages for any pets that are in your vehicle. But again, the gray area would be if it's not your pet. So if you are transporting pets back and forth, I would recommend looking at a commercial auto policy just in case, something was to happen, that there would be coverage there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Because the coverage that your personal, like I said, more personal auto policies are including it, but it's very minimal coverage. I mean, some are in the hundreds of dollars. I've seen some maybe go up to 2,000. But from the standpoint, the value of the pet isn't the concern as much as the liability risk that you're potentially going to run into if worst case scenario, something happens to a pet and a lawsuit comes out. The damages from the liability would probably be more than the value of the pet. It's what you're ultimately going to run into.
So Travis, just a couple of questions here for you. Are you able to kind of give a sense about what maybe the average price difference is between a personal policy and a commercial policy? I know there's lots of variables, but just generally speaking. Yeah,
there's a lot of variables. It's in my experience, you're looking at usually a couple $100 more a year to have that commercial policy on the same vehicle. So for instance, I have like carpenters who try to get away with their truck on a personal policy as long as possible. But when we quote it up, it's, $200-300 more a year. So it depends on the vehicle, depends on type of work that you're doing, but it will be at the minimum, probably a couple $100 more. And the one thing I always try, and I know, when you're doing small business coaching and talking to people about things, one thing I always try to let people know is these are expenses and costs that you should work into your bids, that you should work into your day-to-day operations. So if you're going to have to absorb $300 more for a commercial auto policy, how do you find a way to calculate that into your service that you're now offering? So that's one thing I always try to, when I'm talking to a business owner and talking about costs, it's just reevaluating what you're charging as well. Because as a business owner who's trying to do things the right way, obviously there's an expense there. And your clients probably want to know that you're properly insured and that you have their best interest in mind as well. So that's a good conversation to have.
Great point. Also, is there an option sometimes for people just to get a rider on their insurance, just a slight addition so they're covered?
No. In most cases, the only time is on your personal auto, you can code it for business use, but that is more for someone like a realtor who's driving around more on their day-to-day, but they're not necessarily carrying materials. They're not going to job sites. We can do that. But if you're someone who's truly hauling, transporting goods and services, people, pets, anything along those lines, coworkers, employees, you really should have a standalone commercial policy. But if you're an individual who's just driving, your business is taking photos of houses for insurance agents, or shuttling stuff back and forth, you might be able to get away with a business use. But if you're getting more in depth and more hauling more things or towing things, that's where you're really going to want that commercial policy.
Thanks. And maybe this last question of mine kind of applies to that, but obviously this class will have a second life as a recording for other people to access. So I'm just trying to anticipate questions. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to people that might drive Uber or Lyft or do, independent food delivery businesses, what kind of insurance they should have, if their personal policy is enough. So.
Yep. No, that's a great point. And I'm glad you brought it up. So rideshare it's a royal pain for insurance. And it hasn't evolved much. The one thing I will tell you about the insurance world, it's really slow to evolve to things. It takes forever. Some companies are fine insuring people who use their personal vehicle for rideshare. Other insurance companies are not. If you say you do rideshare, they're going to drop you and tell you to go get coverage somewhere else. The one thing I always tell people is all of these things have a gray area. So Uber and Lyft have their own insurance, and it starts at a certain time, and there's different levels depending on, you get a call to go pick someone up, that's one level. When that person gets in your vehicle, that's a second level. And then when you drop the person off, then Uber shuts down and your personal insurance kicks back in. Where there's always a gray area is if that person is getting out of your vehicle and they fall on the curb, Uber is probably going to say, well, technically they weren't in the car, so now we're at the lower level. So there's going to be some back and forth. So what I always tell people is, if this is something that you want to do, if you want to do rideshare, find an insurance carrier that will accept it. Have the highest limits you can, even regardless if Uber gives you some coverage, because you really need to protect yourself in the worst case scenario. So there's a couple companies out there. I know Progressive does. I know State Farm does. There might be a couple others that are fine with you driving your personal vehicle in a rideshare situation. And I would just confirm with your insurance agent that your company does that. If they don't, find one that does and get the maximum limits you can just to protect yourself. The other thing that's new, I'm not sure how popular it is in Vermont yet, but Turo is a car rental service where you can rent out your vehicle while someone's on vacation. So if you have a car that you don't use, it's similar to using a rental car company, but they're just using your car. So it's an app. You put your car available on the app. People can rent your car. Again, that's something that you're going to want to check with your insurance company to make sure that that's insured if someone was to get into an accident. Turo does offer their own insurance to people while someone's renting the vehicle. But again, it's always those gray areas where if the car is parked at the airport and someone's picking it up and then they bring it back and something happens after the fact, you might run into some issues. So if you're in any type of business where you're sharing your home or you're sharing your vehicle, double check to make sure your insurance company is comfortable with that. If they're not, make sure you find someone that is, because you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you're paying for damage out of pocket, or you're in a tight situation because your insurance carrier doesn't like that.
Thank you, Travis. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. And then, so we'll move from commercial auto, unless anyone has any questions on that. Like I said, lots of options for commercial auto, as far as same with general liability. So you should be able to find a company that can do, all those things. And the other thing too with commercial auto, I will let people know, if you're in a business where you're hauling a trailer, the trailer, any damage that the trailer causes extends from the vehicle towing the trailer. If you want coverage for the trailer itself, if it's a high value trailer, you can definitely insure the trailer on its own. But if it's a utility trailer that you're using in your business, the vehicle that's towing the trailer is where the liability coverage is going to come in. So if you're towing a trailer with your personal car and you're turning a corner, you hit a car, you hit a building, whatever it might be, you cause damage, the liability risk is going to come from the vehicle. So you don't need specific trailer coverage unless it's a trailer that you're worried about damage. You know, if it's a higher value trailer or a new trailer and you want protection for that in case there's damage to it, you can get a policy for that. But just from a liability standpoint, just a rule of thumb for people to know is anything that's being towed by your vehicle, the liability risk follows that vehicle. So if you're renting a trailer to move stuff around, it's going to fall under that vehicle coverage from a liability standpoint. So if you're in a business that hauls stuff, or you have goods that you're transporting and you rent a trailer or anything along those lines, just remember the vehicle towing the trailer is where the liability is going to come into play. So the next thing we'll talk about is workers' comp insurance. And I'll spend a little bit more time on workers' comp just because many people get into business as a sole proprietor, as an individual. And then that great day comes where you've grown enough that you can hire an employee and bring on some staff. The state of Vermont requires you to get workers' comp insurance for any employee that you have. Workers' comp protects your employees if they get injured on the job. It's going to pay for their medical bills. It's going to pay for lost wages. If it's a bad scenario where there's a serious injury, it can pay for training to retrain an individual. If they've, if they lose a limb, if they, something happens where they can't continue to work in the capacity they were before. So it can pay for training. It is required, like I said, as soon as you hire someone, the state's going to require that. The state really cracked down a few years ago because a lot of people were hiring folks as independent contractors to avoid paying workers' comp. The state cracked down more because basically people were avoiding paying unemployment tax. And so what happened is it kind of fell together with the workers' comp. So the state now has said, if this is part of your business operations, they're an employee. You can't call them an independent contractor. So if you're a painter and you bring in someone to paint a house with you, you can't say that they're an independent contractor. They're technically, a W-2. They should be a W-2 employee. If it's not an integral part of your job, and you need to hire someone for, let's say you're a photographer and you're doing a wedding, but you don't do drone work, but someone who does, and you're bringing them in, then that's not necessarily an employee. That is kind of like a one-off contractor situation. But if it is an integral part of your job, then they would be considered employees. So as soon as you hire an employee, you need to get workers' comp insurance. I will tell you, if you're planning on hiring employees, talk about workers' comp with your insurance agent early on in the process. Workers' comp for most business owners is going to be the most expensive insurance piece that you have. I've dealt with a lot of business owners who are like, oh, I've got a new person starting next week. I need workers' comp. And we tell them how much it is. And they kind of pause for a minute because they weren't expecting that. Workers' comp is based on two things: the type of job and the amount of payroll. The more dangerous the job, the riskier the job, the more chance for possible injury, the more expensive the workers' comp insurance is going to be. So if you're a roofer and you're hiring someone, it's going to be pretty expensive. If you are in an office and you're hiring an administrative assistant to do some work for you, then that is probably not going to be as expensive because the risk to that individual getting injured is going to be a lot less. So every business, every job that you think of has a code and it has a rate, an insurance premium rate attached to it. So what the insurance company is going to do is they're going to say, okay, this is a roofer. Here's how much it costs per $100 of payroll. And then they're going to take your payroll and multiply that out. And that's how they're going to determine what the cost for workers' comp is. Workers' comp rates are based off from the state. So there's not a lot of wiggle room between companies. Some companies can give crediting. Some companies might be able to, give you a little bit of a discount. But there's not a huge difference from insurance carrier to insurance carrier because the rates are usually set at the state level. So you might see some savings here or there, but it's usually not going to be substantial change from one company to another. The other thing I will tell you is the longer you've been in business, the longer you've had employees, and if you have a good track record of safety, you can see some savings. You can see some discounts within the workers' comp world. So it does pay to run a safe work environment and to not have claims. On the flip side of that, if you have a lot of claims, you can run into issues with getting workers' comp insurance. One thing that the state does have is they have what's called a high risk pool. So whether you potentially could be a new business that doesn't have a track record and maybe can't find workers' comp, or you're a business that has a bad track record of employee injuries and you have to go into the state pool. The premiums on that tend to be a lot higher, but because the state requires you to have workers' comp, there has to be some place for you to get it. So if you have a bad track record, there are options out there through the state pool. So again, the more difficult, the more risky your business, the more expensive workers' comp is going to be. We don't need employee information. That's one question we get a lot. It's like, oh, do you need to know the names of my employees? Do you need to know how many hours a week they're working? We don't need that information. It's basically based strictly on the total payroll dollar. So whether you have 5 full-time employees making a grand total of 150,000 or 1, or you fired one, you brought in another, we don't need all of that information. We just need the total payroll dollar amount. What's going to happen every year is you will get audited. The insurance company will audit to see how that number truly matched out. So when we're setting up a workers' comp policy, we will say, what do you anticipate the payroll for the year being? If you say it's $30,000, we're going to base the premium off that. At the end of the year, they're going to audit. And let's say it was actually 40,000. Well, you'll get a bill. If it was less, in some cases, you can get a rebate back for overpaid premium. Some companies do have a minimum premium. And what I mean by that is there's a floor. It can't go any lower. So, just know that you might not get money back if you go under the 30,000, because maybe that is the minimum premium they'll write. But just be aware that you will get audited. If you are someone with a seasonal type job and your staffing might be seasonal, we do have things called pay as you go for workers' comp. And what that does is you would submit your payroll depending on the frequency. So if you pay weekly or every other week or once a month, you submit that number to the workers' comp company and they will bill you for that exact amount that month. So what this does is it lowers your audit risk at the end of the year because you're truly paying what you actually use that month as you move forward. So for people who have maybe high summer employment and then it cuts back down in the winter, I recommend pay as you go because you're paying the premium when you're making the most money. And then in the off season, you're not paying as much. The other thing too, in audit, if you have a huge change in payroll throughout the season, and then you get audited, you can get a big bill at the end of the year. So for people with a lot of fluctuation, I do recommend pay as you go options. But with all of these insurance options, I should have touched on that when I started, you can do 12-month. I mean, most carriers are going to do 12-month automatic payments. You can pay it one lump sum, quarterly, semi-annually. These companies are very flexible when it comes to that. You can do EFTs. Monthly EFT is usually the standard. Just have it withdraw from your checking or savings account. But if you want to pay in full, you can. There are no discounts for pay in full on the commercial insurance side. That is a question we get asked a lot. That's just not usually the case. And for the monthly EFT, there's usually no additional fee. So if you're someone that wants to spread that bill out in equal payments, that's an option for you. But for the workers' comp, pay as you go is really good for people who have fluctuating income and payroll during the year. So just remember, and then another thing to remember, as a business owner, you're not required to cover yourself. So as a sole proprietor, you don't need to get workers' comp insurance. When you bring on an employee, you don't need to get workers' comp for yourself. When you bring on an employee, one thing you're going to have to do is exclude yourself. So it's going to be a little extra paperwork. So as a sole proprietor, state doesn't care. You're going along, you're doing your thing. Or as a sole member LLC, you're going along doing your thing. The state doesn't care. You bring in that first employee. Now, if you don't want to be covered, you can be if you want, but if you don't want to be covered, you have to exclude yourself. So it's a form you need to file with the state. We help you with doing all those forms. And that just lets the state know that you're not going to be included in the workers' comp, but you have it for your employee. What I do recommend for all business owners is disability insurance. That's not something I do personally, but I recommend business owners getting disability, especially instead of workers' comp, because workers' comp only covers you on the job. Disability insurance covers you for in most disability policies 24/7. So if you get injured off the job and you can't work and you don't have any income, that's where a disability policy can really help you. So I recommend every business owner look at getting disability insurance. It's usually a lot more cost effective than including yourself on the workers' comp, and it's going to give you broader coverage. Let's see, we got a question. How many years of good safety record? Most companies you're looking at 3. Most carriers are going to want to see somewhere between 3 to 5 years of a good track record before you can start seeing some savings. And what I recommend is if you have that good record, to work with your current carrier to see if they will give you some savings, or shop it around to others. The one thing about insurance is insurance companies love people who have no claims. If you have no claims in your general liability, if you have no claims in your workers' comp, and you're not getting any love from your current carrier, I highly recommend shopping around, because a lot of insurance companies like to have clients who don't have a lot of claims, and they're willing to usually give you, good credit for that, and can give you some discounts. So if you've been in business 3 to 5 years, you're claims free, you've had employees, you haven't had any issues, that's a really good opportunity to start seeing some savings in your business insurance. Does anyone, before I continue on with workers' comp, anyone have any workers' comp questions, concerns?
Travis, I'll just ask, are you able to give an example of what somebody might expect to pay for workman's comp? Just give a couple of different examples or variables.
Yeah, it can be difficult because it does depend on payroll. So I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Like I have a cleaner, residential cleaner. She has 1 employee. I think the payroll is probably around 30 grand for the year. I think it's like $700-800. I have some people who just have 1 office employee. They're paying around 1,000, a little under 1,000. But then if you go out to the contractor world, you could be looking at several thousands for people who are more high risk. The more stationary jobs, the more jobs, in an office, in a store, retail type of environment. Well, here's a good one I actually was just working on the other day. So I have someone who has a retail art store, and they're bringing on an employee, and they're looking at about 25,000 in payroll, and it's going to be about $600 for the year. So, somewhere in that range. And again, depending on the amount of payroll you have and the type of job, but you're normally, the lowest you're usually going to get is somewhere between 500 and 600. And then as you grow and depending on the type of job, you're looking at thousands. But again, it depends on that type of work. The more risky the work, and that's usually where I see the people with the long pause is people who are in the trades, contractor type folks who are bringing on someone to help, do carpentry, do plumbing, electrical, and aren't prepared to see, several $1,000s in workers' comp. The people who have, the office or the retail space or the small, cleaning business, it's usually a little more manageable.
Thank you. That's helpful.
And again, you want to make sure you're getting that sooner than later. Technically, it's supposed to start the same day your employees start. Obviously we have some wiggle room, but one of the questions that all companies are going to ask is, have people been working without workers' comp? And if they have, you could have an issue with getting a good policy. Like I said, there is the state pool at the very least. You could have that and then have to do that for a full year. But it is something that you really want to plan ahead. And if you're thinking about bringing on an employee, work with your insurance agent to get those things in the pipeline sooner than later. And then for most insurance agents, it's usually just a flip of the switch. A lot of us can get things done same day if we're planned ahead. Getting quotes for business insurance is not like auto insurance. That's the other thing I'll let people know. Like home and auto insurance, we can usually quote it within an hour. Same day, not a problem. Business insurance can be a lot more difficult because there's usually more questions. We're running it manually through a lot of different companies. And so we'd like to have as much lead time as possible. And what benefits you with that is it also allows us to shop it more. I mean, if it's a scenario where I need coverage today, we're probably going to go to the company that's easiest and quickest to write with, just because we need to get it done. And so we might not be shopping as much. But if you're someone who's planning ahead and has time, we can get you the appropriate information. And then from there, we can work on quotes with all of our companies. Auto claims. Okay. No, they are definitely looked at separately. So workers' comp is going to be workers' comp. That's all they're going to look at. So what companies will do, for those of you that have been in business and have insurance and you're looking to shop, commercial companies are going to ask for something that's called loss runs. Now, if you call your insurance agent and say I need loss runs, they're going to know what that means. But basically, a loss run report is a report that your business insurance will run to show if you've had any claims in the last 3 to 5 years. So when we're quoting business insurance, now if it's a startup, it's a moot point. We don't really have to ask that question. But if it's someone who has coverage or who's been in business for a while, they will ask, have they had any claims in the last 3 to 5 years? And they will ask for these loss runs. Now the loss runs will show how much was paid out. They'll show what the claim was, the severity of the claim. And then from there, that can impact your premium. Some companies don't care. If it's small enough, it might not impact you at all. But they will ask for what's called loss runs, and they are looked at individually. So if you're shopping workers' comp, they're not going to ask for your general liability or your commercial auto loss runs. They're just going to look at workers' comp. So each policy is looked at individually. So they're not looking at your total claims history across all policies. Does anyone have any workers' comp questions before I move on to the next topic? Okay. And I'll just wrap it up by saying, like, again, if your business changes throughout the year, you bring on employees, we don't need to know the individual movements. But if you do see a big change in payroll, it's always good, if you're not on a pay-as-you-go, to let your insurance agent know so they can adjust accordingly. Because anything you can do to minimize the audit impact at the end of the year is pretty big. Because that's usually where some companies get in trouble, is they'll bring on staff during the year. They might not notify us. And then at the end of the year, they get an audit, and now they're tens of thousands of dollars higher in payroll than we anticipated. And they're getting a big bill that has to be paid quickly. So if you do have changes to your business, it's always a good idea to have those conversations with your insurance agent. And that goes for anything. If you're I'm going to talk about business property next, but if you're acquiring new tools, new equipment, you're changing your business model, you're doing something different, it's always good to have that conversation with your insurance agent to make sure that those things are covered. So the next piece is business personal property. So a lot of times this can be included in your general liability policy. We can wrap it all, bundle it nicely in one policy. So what business personal property is, it's going to be the stuff that you use in your day-to-day operations. So tools, equipment, if you're a landscaper, maybe you got lawnmowers, you have small tractors. If you're a retailer, it's your inventory, maybe shelves that you have. If you're a baker or a restaurant, food, equipment within the restaurant, within your, diner, within the bakery that you might have. Anything that you use in your business would fall under business personal property. This includes office furniture, computers, shelving, cabinets, display cases, anything along those lines. Now, similar to homeowners insurance and personal property, there can be limits for certain things, and we want to make sure if you have high value equipment that we're doing what's called a schedule on your business personal property. So if you're a medical office and you have a piece of machinery that's worth $35,000, we're going to want to make sure that we put a line item for that piece of machinery in case something happens, that it can be properly covered. So we would have name, like serial number, things along those lines. If you're a contractor and you have random tools, we don't need to list each individual tool. It would fall under a blanket tool coverage. If you're a cleaner, you don't need to list all the vacuums you have and everything that you're using. It would fall under a blanket coverage. But if you have a higher valued, unique item that costs some money, we would want to make sure that we're insuring that properly. So those are types of things that you're going to want to let your insurance agent know about. So we can put those in as a line item. These things are going to have a deductible similar to a home and auto policy. So with general liability, usually there's no deductible you need to worry about. If someone comes in and they get hurt and they sue you for those damages, usually the general liability is just covered without a deductible. Business personal property, there would be a deductible. So if you had a theft, if you had fire, water damage in your location and something happened to your property, there would be a deductible there. In most cases, it's $500. And again, we can cover anything that you use in your business. Back to Simeon's earlier question about homeowners insurance. If you are working from home, a lot of homeowners policies will throw in on-site business personal property coverage. Usually that maxes out around $5,000. So if you are operating your business out of your house and you have some office equipment or maybe a laptop or a desktop computer, usually the coverage provided in your homeowner's policy would be substantial enough to cover that. But if you have a lot of material, if you have a lot of inventory, you would want to make sure that you're covering that either on a business owner's policy or a standalone business personal property. I know it's confusing because people always say it says business personal property, but it is business property. They just call it BPP for whatever reason. You can get a standalone policy for those. So some folks who have heavy equipment or big machinery, they can get a standalone. If someone has, this is where the trailer, we talked about if you have a trailer that has some value that you tow behind your vehicle and you want to get coverage for that, we can put that under a business personal property. You can get a policy if you have a food truck. You can get a policy that covers the food truck under a business personal property. Inland marine, they call it an inland marine policy. You can cover that food truck. Now that would be separate from the liability piece, but if there was damage to the food truck itself, that could fall under that business personal property. So anything that you're using in your business operations would fall under this. Like I said, for most people, when we're writing a general liability policy, we'll ask if they have any business personal property that needs to be covered. We will include it in that general liability policy. It's going to obviously add a little bit to the premium. It's usually not substantial. Business personal property is probably the least expensive thing when it comes to business insurance that you're going to have to deal with. And again, that's going to cover for things such as theft, fire, water damage. So if you have tools that you're parking, in your driveway at night in a vehicle or in a shed or what have you, those things would be covered. If inventory in a store, those things would be covered. So theft, inventory theft, retail theft has really been on the rise in the last couple of years. So again, the insurance company, it's not a requirement, but insurance companies will ask, what type of measures do you have? Do you have security system? Do you have gates? Do you have deadbolt doors? What type of security do you have? That can help. It's not substantial savings. It's not like you're going to shave hundreds of dollars off from your premium, but every little bit helps. But it does also help you from the standpoint that, like I said, retail theft is on the rise, people breaking into places. So more retailers and more businesses are taking the necessary steps to put in security measures that they can help with their insurance agents and their insurance carriers if something does happen. So does anyone have any questions on what might be covered or not covered under business personal property?
Yes. If the most expensive thing for my business personal property is my vehicle, is that different than having commercial auto insurance?
Nope. So your vehicle would fall under commercial auto insurance. So if you don't really have anything of value in your business, the need for business personal property wouldn't be there. Most policies will throw in a minimum of like $1,000 as a kind of like a throw-in thing. But if your only valued item is your vehicle, it would fall under the commercial auto policy.
So like say I work out of my home, I rent, but I have like a computer and things like that I use for my business. And so I have like a small office space, but the biggest, most expensive thing would be my vehicle.
Yep. So commercial auto for the vehicle, for, the computer and maybe some small office, miscellaneous office stuff, you could add $1,000 to $2,000 on a general liability policy for very little and have those things covered.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And a lot of vendors, a lot of crafters, I write a lot of folks who are artists, and, over the last couple of years, a lot of people have taken their hobby and turned it into a business and a full-time gig. And, they have materials, and you don't really think about the value of your materials if you're a painter or you're doing, you're making something at home. So you want to make sure you are evaluating, because those things do add up quickly. I mean, if you think of the materials, canvas and paints and other things, or if you're, other artisans who are doing stuff, making jewelry or whatever it might be, it doesn't take long before your inventory starts to add up. So you want to make sure that you're taking that into consideration. And like I said, it's fairly inexpensive to add those things to a business owner's liability policy.
I just ask one more thing. You had
Sure.
talked about homeowners insurance if you're working out of your home, but what if you're a renter? Would it be also maybe renter's insurance you could add?
Yep. And some renters insurance as well. That some of them, depending on which company you work with, you can add some business personal property coverage to your renter's policy. And so for your situation, if you have renters, that would be a good place to start. Usually it's a simple endorsement that, the agent can click on. And like I said, it adds very little to the premium. But it would be worth, if you're a renter, to look into that and have those. It's basically called the same thing. It's business personal property coverage on your homeowners or your renter's policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And those are great because it's just incidental stuff. It's, obviously if you're manufacturing things out of your home or apartment, not the best option to go. But if you have miscellaneous office supplies, office equipment, those coverages on your homeowners and renters are really the most cost efficient way to go. And it's really enough coverage to satisfy what you need.
Travis, just got a couple follow-up questions for you. Going back to your discussion on like artists and their inventory. So in that example, would the value of the inventory be based on, like, for example, the artist's completed painting that they say is worth $5,000, or would it be on the actual raw inventory amount, like a roll of canvas is a lot less.
Right. Yeah, no, we would want to include finished product. So, if you've made jewelry and, the product, the items that go into making the earrings are $3, but the earrings sell for 15, we're going to want to include that finished product. So you're going to want to make sure now for things like that, lower value items, they're not going to require an itemized list. But if you're this individual whose art supply store I insure, they have rotating artists come in every 8 weeks to display their work for sale. So there's some higher value stuff there. And so those are the types of items that you want to make sure when we're insuring them, we have a true value, we have a description, we have a better understanding. But yeah, you want to calculate your inventory costs on the completed goods side. So.
If there's a claim made, will the insurance company depreciate an item?
No, it's gonna be replacement costs. So, and for equipment, it's usually an agreed upon value. So if it's a lawnmower and it's what's the cost brand new, and we're insuring it for that with a replacement cost. But for artisans, for individuals who have office supplies or inventory, they're going to do it at a replacement cost coverage, and that value, as opposed to saying, well, these have been sitting here for a year, 2 years, they're not worth that anymore. So it is going to be more of a replacement cost. Okay.
And I'm just curious, given some of the examples you used, like if property got damaged, say during a rain event, or there was a theft or something to that effect, how would the person make the claim? What is the insurance company going to want to see to substantiate that happened?
Yeah. So first step would be either call your agent or call the insurance carrier, depending on which one. And they're going to take down all the information when it happened. They'll look to get as much information from you as possible. Again, if you have some security devices, I always recommend calling the authorities. I would get a police report. That's usually the first thing that they're going to recommend that you do. If it's a break-in, if it's theft, obviously, if it's water or fire damage, that's going to be pretty easy to see. So they will send an adjuster out. So if it's a situation of an event that caused the damage outside of a theft, they will send out an adjuster. Usually, if you're renting space, your landlord's insurance has already, been called, and they're going to start looking as well. So they're going to send someone out to evaluate the damage. You do want to try to mitigate as much damage as possible. So obviously, if you have a location, there's water running in, you're going to want to try to stop it. You're going to call people and try to limit as much damage as possible. But as soon as that's done, reach out to the insurance company right away. Again, if it's a theft situation, call the authorities, get a police report. At the very least, that's going to help from the claim standpoint, as opposed to, oh, things were stolen. Did you call the cops? No. Then we could run into a little bit more of an issue. But if it's a weather related thing, they will send an adjuster out to take a look, and they're going to evaluate everything that's going on. The other thing, and this is a little bit of a deeper dive, but your question brought this up. A lot of times, your general liability and your business owner's policy does cover you for lost income. So if you have a weather event, let's say you have a restaurant or a retail store, and you have a weather event that prohibits you from opening up, you can file a claim on your business owner's policy for lost income. Usually there's a time period, 24 to 48 hours, depending on the policy. But if you have to be closed for 3 or 4 days and you can't have any income coming in, you can file claims for lost income on your business owner's policy. Now, depending on the type of business you have, that can be difficult to prove. If you're a vendor who does a craft fair at, the Burlington Farmers Market, and there was no market that day, nothing really prohibited you from going to the market. But if you're a store and you can show historical sales data or what have you, you do have the potential to file a loss income claim through your business owner's policy. So that's something that a lot of people don't think about when they're in the middle of a weather event or a fire, or they're displaced. Anytime something happens to your business that negatively impacts it, always call your insurance agent, always call the insurance company. There might be coverage there. There might be coverage to relocate you if it's going to be a long-term situation where your storefront is going to be closed down for 2 months because there was a fire and they got to rebuild it. There might be coverage to reimburse you to move somewhere else. So always check with your insurance company and your insurance carrier. Never assume there's no coverage. Always check. And what I always tell people is we'll file the claim. It doesn't hurt to file the claim and let the claims department tell us no. That's what I always say. I don't know if it's covered or not. I'm not a claims guy, but I always tell people, let's file the claim. If it's not covered, they'll let us know, but hey, it might be covered. And if you can get something for it, it's worth doing. So there's a lot of extras within those policies, that people sometimes forget about. They just think, oh, it's not covered. Always check.
Thank you. That's good to know. I think sometimes there's a fear or concern about calling an insurance company to see if something is covered, and even if they don't pursue the claim, that their insurance is going to go up. Is that true?
It's not, because we can see if anything was paid out. So we can see that a claim was submitted on such and such date, and then they'll show that it's closed, and then there'll be a section for payout, and it will show that nothing got paid out. So it's definitely not going to impact your current insurance because they didn't pay anything out. But it's always good to submit the claim. The only caveat would obviously be if you moved insurance companies and then they asked for loss runs, it would show that a claim was submitted, but it would show that nothing was paid out. So you might have to explain to another insurance company what happened. But from your current insurance company, it really should have zero impact, because at the end of the day, no money exchanged hands, nothing was ever finalized. So that's why I always recommend file the claim. Let's see what happens, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I will move into the final topic, which is cyber liability insurance. This has become more and more of an issue and more of a topic over the last couple of years as more people are doing things virtually. They're taking payments through different payment apps. They're storing personal data, and we're just becoming more technology oriented. So cyber liability insurance is going to protect you if your business has a data breach, a hack, a ransomware situation, or a situation where you have personal information, let's say on a laptop, and that laptop gets stolen. It also covers you, and this is one that's kind of overlooked a lot because it's more of a physical thing, but if you have client information in files and someone was to break into an office and steal that information, that's a data breach. I mean, it's an old school data breach, but it's a data breach nonetheless. I mean, someone now has someone else's information. So this is not standard coverage on a business liability, general liability, or professional liability. This is either a separate policy or an add-on. Now, more companies are adding on low-level coverage where you can get it on your general liability policy. You can throw in 25,000, 50,000, 100,000. Most companies will go up to 300,000 in cyber liability coverage. And for many companies, especially small companies, that's probably enough. So the concern that you're going to have if you have one of these breaches is a couple of things. One, you got to notify everybody. The government requires that if you've had a data breach, you've got to notify everyone that could potentially be involved. You might have to pay for credit monitoring for these individuals as well. So these things can quickly add up, and that's what cyber liability insurance will help you with. If there's a ransomware situation, I don't know if many remember a few years back, Wendell's Furniture had this situation where they got hacked and it was a ransomware situation. They couldn't access anything. They couldn't access their calendar. They basically were telling people, if you've purchased furniture from us and are expecting a delivery, call us because our calendar is inoperable. We have no idea. So the types of things like this can happen. It can be personal information that gets taken. The other thing that cyber liability insurance can help you with is rebuilding yourself and your business identity. If you have a cyber hack, we've all heard of them, Hannaford, TJ Maxx, we immediately have a negative feeling about that business. And so do you need to repair your identity and your business's reputation? Cyber liability insurance can help you with that. It can help you with putting something out, sending something to your clients. So it's going to help you with, like I said, following up with customers who, if there was a data breach, paying for credit monitoring, paying for reputation rebuilding, ransomware situations, anything along those lines. Point of sale, a lot of time when cyber liability started, the general rule of thumb was people would say, well, I don't accept payments. I don't have a point of sale system. I'm not a restaurant. I'm not a grocery store. I maybe send a QuickBooks invoice and then someone pays me. You still have personal information. You have information on a computer somewhere probably, and you can't always rely on the third party that you're using to necessarily protect you if something was to happen. So even though these third-party apps have their own coverage, they have their own security protection, at the end of the day, ultimately the client can come back to you as the end user and say, well, I bought such and such product, service, good from you. I'm holding you accountable for what happened. You didn't vet your vendor better. So this is why it's always good to carry cyber liability coverage. If you're someone who does minimal transactions and has minimal client data on a computer, then you can probably get away with the endorsement that you can get on your general liability policy. If you're someone that's doing a lot more high-level volume of transactions, retaining personal data, credit card information, I would recommend inquiring about a standalone cyber liability policy. Again, these can be expensive, but if you have good revenue and you're doing a lot of transactions, it's definitely worth protecting you because the out-of-pocket cost can be pretty high. But for just throwing on some base level coverage, you can usually get extra coverage for around $100 to $200 a year thrown on your policy. And that is something that we're doing more as an agency. We always recommend it and then let the client decide if they want it or not. But we're going to show you the full package, say, hey, here's what it is. Here's the additional fee and cost for that. Do you want it? Yes or no? And let you ultimately decide. But again, if you're not doing a lot of transactions, if you're not retaining a lot of client information, the smaller amounts are probably fine for you. But as your business grows and the more involved you get, this is big for consultants as well. If you're consulting for someone and you're retaining your client's information, so a lot of people who are doing, website work, maintaining websites for people, or handling social media content, stuff along those lines. If you're working with your client's clients and you're holding that information, it's really important to protect them and to have that. And more people are recommending the people that they do contracts with. And that's another piece, not specific to cyber, but in your own business and your own day-to-day life, it's always a good idea for the people that you're doing business with to ask them for proof of insurance. That's one thing we do a lot in our office is we'll get calls from people. It's called a certificate of insurance. So I talk a lot about vendors and markets and farmers markets. It's the Burlington Farmers Market. The last month, I've been getting a lot of calls from people saying the Burlington Farmers Market needs a certificate of insurance. And basically what a certificate of insurance is, it's a one-page document that shows the company, the individual, their business name. It shows the types of policies that individual has and which companies those policies are with. It shows the effective dates of those policies. It shows the insurance limits of those policies, and then it has a signature from someone in the office. And that's what we send out as a certificate of insurance. A lot of times, some folks will ask to be listed as an additional insured on that certificate of insurance. And what that basically means is Burlington Farmers Market wants to be listed as an additional insured so that if ABC Watercolors is a vendor and someone gets hurt and decides to sue somebody, that you, the vendor, your insurance company will protect you, and it's going to protect the farmer's market in case something happens. Not to go down a deeper hole with that, but most companies, we can get what's called blanket additional insured, and we always recommend that. And that just basically means anyone who asks for this can get it. We don't have to add them to the policy. It's not an additional fee. And that way, if you're doing a lot of events, or you do a lot of contract work, or you work with a lot of vendors who require proof of insurance, it's just a seamless, we just ship it off to them and we'll do that all in-house. So in your day-to-day life, in your business world, it's always good to ask that the people you're doing business with or you're signing contracts with have insurance as well. So does anyone have any questions about cyber liability or cyber insurance or data breaches?
Well, surprise, surprise, I do.
That's fine. You've been through these. You know the question.
So an example of a business that would need a cyber policy, would a business that has like a membership, would that be an obvious example of an online membership platform? Would that be an obvious example of somebody that would need cybersecurity?
Yeah, anyone who's retaining anything like along the HIPAA lines of information. So are you retaining names, addresses, phone numbers, date of birth, anything along those lines? If that's being retained in a database that you operate or maintain, then yes. Nonprofits, it's the same thing. A lot of nonprofit organizations have a membership role. And they have all that information in there because they're soliciting, their members. So that would definitely be, and I think groups like that think less because they're probably asking for money maybe once or twice a year when they're doing a campaign. They have all of their members' information on an internal database somewhere, but they're not conducting a lot of transactions. So in their mind, they're thinking this isn't really that big of a deal. We're not doing a lot of transactions here. We're not retaining payment information. But if someone hacked into that database or someone stole an employee laptop, now you have all this information. So that's usually the good rule of thumb. How much information are you retaining? Now, if you just have a file that says, an Excel spreadsheet that says Travis Spencer is a client, but you don't have anything else on Travis Spencer, you might be fine because there's no other data there. But if you have my name, my phone number, my address, if you have 3 pieces of information, that's usually enough for people to, start stealing identities or hacking into things. So that's really where you as a business want to think about adding that coverage.
So this might be digging into minutia of my question, but if a business has both a membership for that, a website membership, but also an app membership, would they need two forms of cybersecurity or just one to cover the business? Just one would cover the business. Okay.
Yep. And this brings up a great point too, where if you do use a vendor or you have a consultant, so maybe if you're someone that retains a database of information, if you are a nonprofit, but maybe you outsource your campaigning. So you don't necessarily do it in-house, but you have a third-party vendor who does your mailers or does an email blast or whatever. This is where that additional insured piece would come in for you as the organization to ask your vendor who's doing this type of stuff for you. We need to be listed as an additional insured on your insurance policy because that's going to give you that level of protection where if the vendor gets hacked and something happens to them, then you would be covered as well.
So in that example, would it be appropriate for somebody to say, oh, I'm conducting all of my campaigns through Constant Contact or another platform like that? Would you legitimately go to them and ask for that?
Those types of vendors is going to be a little more difficult. That's going to be more on you. But I would think, Constant Contact, you still kind of control to some extent. So you're kind of putting it together. So they're the platform and the app that you use, but you're kind of the one maintaining the database and setting that stuff up. So you'd still want to have your own coverage on that. It would be more if it's a true handoff of where you're not even dealing with it. I'm a school trying to private school trying to fundraise, but we're not gonna have anyone in-house do that. We're gonna have a third party do it. That's where you'd want to make sure you're getting that additional.
I see. Thank you.
Not a problem. So that's basically all the coverages I wanted to cover. So I will open the floor. If there's something I missed, if you have a specific question along the lines for your business, anything about insurance, I'll be happy to answer it if I can. Anything about business, anything. I will say it's boring. Insurance is boring. I admit it. I've been doing it for 10 years. It's not that exciting. We never hope to have to file a claim for our clients, but we want to make sure that if we do, I know it is, everyone views it as a necessary evil. I got to pay these premiums every month or year. But at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, if you work really hard for your business, please make sure at the very least you have the right coverage, because one claim can really just wipe you out. And it's amazing how many small businesses don't have insurance. It happens. And a lot of times, like I said early on, a lot of times people don't think about it until someone asks them for proof of it. And that's usually when I get a phone call. So even if it's low level coverage in the beginning and you ramp up as your business ramps up, just do whatever you can to take those necessary steps.
I had a client ask me if I was bonded. Is there a difference between that and what we've talked about?
Yeah, so not sure why as a pet sitter they'd ask you if you'd be bonded. So basically, bonding usually happens when someone is doing a bid for a government entity. So basically, let's say you're submitting a bid for a town to do a project, whether it's a building project, whatever it might be that the town's hiring you for. The town might require you to have a bond, and basically the bond is a dollar amount that covers that project. So if it's going to be a $50,000 project or a $500,000 project, and you're going to be paving the road, they might say, well, we need a bond. And the reason being, if you do not fulfill that contract, the town needs the ability to go back and recoup the money. As an individual who's just doing a service for another individual, there's really not much need to be bonded. Your general liability coverage would cover anything that person would come after you for. And that's what general liability is. If someone sues you, here's another scenario. I had someone, this is more of a homeowners thing, but someone lives in Isle of Lamont. They were renting a tent from the city, and the city wanted proof of insurance. And the reason being is if something happened to that tent, the town could then come after that individual and sue them. So that's the whole point of the liability. And providing your customer with proof of liability insurance should satisfy them, because if something does happen, they could just call that insurance company and call your insurance agent and file a claim. And just to let people know that we get calls from people like, I want to file a claim against so-and-so, they're supposed to sand the parking lot at People's United Bank and I slipped and fell. And we basically will reach out to our client first and we'll have a conversation. We can file the claim and it'll be investigated and everything will go from there. But the fact that they're asking you for a bond seems a little excessive given the type of work that you're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Travis. Thank you for doing this. It's so helpful.
No problem.
I have two questions on slightly different tracks, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first one is, so I have malpractice insurance as a healthcare provider, and I haven't started a business yet, but I'm in the process of development. And I'm just wondering if I would also need professional liability insurance on top of the malpractice insurance.
No, you should be fine with just the malpractice insurance, because that's going to cover you for basically any medical recommendation or medical procedure that you conduct. So malpractice would be perfectly fine. You don't need.
Okay, great. And then the second question is about the homeowners policy. So my goal is to do a little bit of private practice out of a dedicated space in my home.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if my current homeowners insurance policy, I understand that I need to get general business liability, but I'm wondering if I also need to change my current homeowners policy.
You probably don't need to change it. Having general liability will protect you. When you do a general liability policy, they're going to ask you what your locations are.
Right.
So if you have multiple locations, you list your home and wherever else you might be working. You just might want to let your home insurance company know that you're going to be doing business, but they'll probably ask for proof of coverage for the general liability. So you shouldn't have to change anything, but you want to provide them with proof that you have general liability. That way they can rest assured that if something happens, you already have a policy in place.
Okay. And would you recommend trying to do the home policy and the business policy through the same company?
Yes, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
And that one company would love that even more, because it just creates continuity of coverage. So you don't have two companies who are fighting over,
Right.
oh, well, this person was in the driveway. No, this is a homeowner's claim. No, this person, so I would, if you can, then I would recommend trying to keep both with the same company.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that.
Yeah, not a problem. And one thing about malpractice insurance is it's a limited market. Not everyone does it. And one thing I have found out with certain types of healthcare professionals, there's a lot of organizations where you can get really inexpensive insurance through that membership organization. So, I forget all the acronyms that are out there for all the different types of things, but like I know physical therapists, for instance, there's an association that they're a member of to get certified. They provide that malpractice insurance for a very reasonable rate compared to what it would be on the open market. So if you are someone that's in a specific healthcare type of field and you have that membership organization, that's always a good place to start for insurance.
That was a perfect example because I actually am a physical therapist. I don't know how you guessed that. And so the malpractice insurance doesn't necessarily have to be through the same company as the business and the homeowners insurance.
It doesn't, because most companies don't write malpractice insurance. It's
Gotcha.
a very niche market. So yeah.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have any questions?
Well, Travis, thank you so much for all the knowledge and information you shared with us today. It's so interesting and it's so applicable, I think, across the board. And there's definitely a lot to know, but this really, I think, helps kind of set the foundation. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the goal. Just give you enough ammunition for when you're having those conversations that you understand what you're talking about and what you're looking for.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any additional questions before we wrap things up?
And don't hesitate. I'll let everyone know. If you have questions, general questions, please feel free to email me. I'm probably the most laid back insurance person because I help people who aren't my clients all the time. So if you just have a general question, you want a second opinion, you have a lifelong insurance agent, but you just question what they're asking you, don't hesitate. Shoot me an email, call. I'll give you that second opinion or my 2 cents, and you can kind of take it from there.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Travis.
You're welcome.
Rachel, do you want to share the information?
Yeah, I just want to thank Travis as well. That was incredibly informative. Thank you for your time and expertise. I just want to let everyone know that I will be sharing the slides that you saw at the beginning, in addition to a few links to statewide resources for microbusiness, a variety of programs. So keep an eye out for that. In that email, there'll also be contact information for microbusiness counselors throughout the state, as well as for Travis, if you want to take him up on that offer. And usually I like to plug upcoming workshops. We're in a bit of a hiatus. So if you are interested in following us for more workshops, just keep tuned into the CVOEO website. That's going to be your best spot to stay up to date. And I guess my final plug is that this is being recorded, and I'll remember to stop it before I say bye to all of you. So you will receive a link to this recording in your email this afternoon as well.
And Rachel, I'd like to throw out there a plug for one other thing. For anyone who wants to, I'm a member of a networking group. There's a lot of different networking groups in the state. For any small business who wants to get their name out there, who wants to meet other business people to try to promote your business, feel free to reach out. The organization I'm part of has groups all throughout the state. A lot of them meet via Zoom, and it's a wonderful opportunity to visit, get your business out into the public eye and let people know who you are. And it's a great opportunity to grow and get more clients. So if you ever need any other business resource, I know a lot of folks and would be happy to introduce you. So feel free to reach out.
Great. Thank you, Travis. Is that BNI, just out of curiosity?
It is.
It is? Okay,
It is.
great.
You know, I believe you know Allison. I think Allison Davis, because she's in the group. I think she
Oh,
knows.
rings a bell.
Yeah.
Rings a bell. Yeah, great. Great. Thank you. It's a great offer.
All right. Well, thank you all. I'm going to stop this recording now. And thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you got some really great takeaways, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. I
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Travis.
You're welcome.